I look forward to the day that access to pleasure is equal. If women were having orgasms on surveys, if they were able to report having orgasms frequently and always the way men do who are sexually active, it would be a different world. Women aren't supposed to have sex, talk about it, like it, right? We're supposed to have babies, not orgasms. You know, when you put yourself out there and say something that maybe people don't normally talk about and do so without shame, it's almost like you've lit a match. I'm this woman on the internet who likes sex, who thinks it's okay to like sex. It's like, I think people think I have like orgies or something. Men have to go on this journey of women being able to access pleasure and health. Unfortunately, things like condoms and sex toys and things, even if they're to be used with a woman, it's more likely to be a man making the purchase. Because it's like, if it's going to arrive at the house and someone's name is on the box, even if it's discreet, if your mom opens it, it's better that your husband had it to his name.
Today, we are honored to have with us Leeza Mangaldas, India's beloved sex-positive content creator, educator, author, and the founder of Leezoos, an intimacy brand. Leeza also hosts two insightful podcasts, Love Matters and the Sex Podcast, where she explores deeply topics around sexuality, gender, and love. In today's conversation, I am so keen to find out how Leeza managed to become one of the most beloved sex-positive content creators in a culturally sensitive and complex country like India. An ally to the UN, and from what I can tell, a total girl's girl, a feminist icon in her own right, and most importantly, a messiah for female pleasure, Leeza Mangaldas is here with us. This episode is powered by Nipposh. Welcome, Leeza, to #Preach.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been an admirer of you for like 13 years, ever since I first learned of your brand.
Okay, so I'm going to get right into it. Your journey is one that is truly unique in the Indian landscape of content creation, of creating your own brand all around sexual pleasure. So I want to first start with, and I think everybody who's listening would want to know, how did it all begin? Because from what I know, you started as a TV anchor.
So I actually studied literature and art with a focus on gender and sexuality in college. And so sexuality had always been really interesting to me. Like for as long as I can remember, I thought it was like the most interesting thing in the world. Like who can debate that, right? But I never thought you could have a career where learning about and talking about and initiating conversations about sexuality could be the work you do. You know what I mean? I feel like, I don't know.
Especially in India.
Yeah, like 20 years ago, that was unfathomable. So I thought I'd be a journalist. You know, and at the time, mainstream media was still television, and the internet hadn't taken the big chunk of the pie that it has now. And, you know, when you're like 20 years old, just out of college, you don't get to pick what you're presenting on, or like, you don't really get to pick the opportunities. You just take the opportunities that come your way, right? So I was not interested in football or cars, or like some of the shows that I ended up presenting were because those were that was what I got. And you have bills to pay, and you know, and you learn. I mean, I think a lot of gratitude for those experiences, because if you can talk with conviction about things you don't care about, you can definitely talk with conviction about the things you care about, you know. And I learned to care. I mean, I think it's hard to do any work without growing to enjoy it. Otherwise you won't do it. And I'm that sort of person who takes any work I do very seriously. So even for the football, even though like some part of me wonders how I did it, I committed, you know.
Yeah.
And I think the skills were so transferable. And also I was like, okay, I don't want to wait around for opportunities to come to me. I have to create opportunities. So I just started a YouTube channel in 2016, 17, thinking like, you know, even if 10 people tune in, it doesn't even matter actually who tunes in. I have to do this because I want to do it. And it also came from a place of just being so disappointed and frustrated with navigating sexuality, sexual health, relationships as a single, or like as a young Indian woman, you know, like why is buying condoms so embarrassing? Why does like no guy seem to know where the clitoris is? Like why is no one using contraception? You know? So it came from a place of like, we've got to be talking about this. I can't be the only one having these frustrations. I'm sure actually so many people want to have these conversations. I have the privilege of a family that's not going to get in my way. I think sadly, like for most people, the trolling starts at home.
Yeah.
You know, when you're trying to approach a subject like sex as a woman. I mean, women aren't supposed to have sex,
Not at
talk
all,
about it,
yeah.
like it, right? We're supposed to have babies, not
Right.
orgasms. Anyway, so I felt like I was lucky to be in a position to have these conversations without being personally unsafe in any way in my immediate environment. Like, that's literally something people have to think about.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I'm just going to do it. And then before you know, like, suddenly so many people are resonating, tuning in. I would have, I would never have imagined that that it would become sustainable, and then that I'd even be able to start a brand that allows for people to have a tangible sort of like a tool or
Yeah.
tools, a toolkit, a pleasure chest,
Yeah.
via which to explore some of the things I talk about in theory. So I couldn't have picked like 10. I don't think it was like I saw 10 years ago or something like this is what I'm going to do and then this is what I'm going to do. It just unfolded.
Yeah, there was
you
no
know?
vision board. It was just
I mean, I never imagined it possible. If you told me 10 years ago I'd have a sex toy brand, or that being a sexual pleasure focused content creator could even be a thing, I probably wouldn't have.
yeah.
I don't know. I would have doubted.
So that point of where you said, luckily you were born into a family that wasn't going to come in your way, and that trolling starts at home. So I want to like go back a little bit into your childhood and understand. Like, I know that you picked this as you went to Columbia, if I'm not mistaken, to study on this topic. But what led you to pick this? And how did you as a family decide that, okay, Leeza is going to Columbia to study?
I was an undergrad at Columbia, and I was really lucky to get a scholarship. And when I was like 17, I hadn't decided my major yet when I went. And the wonderful thing about a liberal arts undergraduate program at most U.S. universities is that it's almost like an extension of high school, where you can take like 5 or 6 or 10 subjects, in your first year, and then every semester like up to 7 courses, which can be quite diverse. And I was that kind of young person who really loved school. Like, I would have just been in school forever. I loved books. I was super nerdy.
Yeah.
And I would have majored in like 10 subjects if I could have. So I did not, there was not a sort of major in sexuality per se. I ended up majoring in literature and art with a focus on gender and sexuality. Like, thematically, my writing and art was focused on those subjects. But yeah, it wasn't so structured a program that it was like, Leeza is going to Columbia to study sex. I wish there was such a thing.
Yeah.
At the most, they have like a gender studies department, but in general, anywhere in the world, and particularly India, it's kind of hard to, if you want to be a sex educator, it's not like a well laid out path with
Absolutely.
a degree waiting
Yeah.
for you. And basically, my parents were super, super supportive of anything that my brother and I wanted to do. Like, it was never a question. The approval was not something we had to fight for, or like earn.
Okay.
We had it. And I feel
That's
really, lucky. Like, it was not conditional at all. I just think it's so important for families to make sure that the love they have for their kids is unconditional, because the rest of the world is fucking very conditional in how they allocate value and love, right?
Was there
Whatever.
any experience, particularly, or a story or a moment that you feel like got you attracted or inquisitive about gender roles and about sexuality? Or it was just your natural curiosity that took you there?
I think I've always been quite self-aware, I think, in terms of just from a young age interrogating how those types of things impact my life. Maybe it's from I don't think my consciousness around social justice was so acute as such a young person, but I was always aware of like how things are different for men and women, or like I found all of that interesting, and I would read about it. And I think that I also during puberty, I lost a bunch of weight. People behaved so differently than the same people who were like making fun of me last year suddenly like wanted my number. It was a funny transition. And you're very aware of those things as well. And so I think, gender roles and sexuality were of interest to me as when I was deciding what to study, and the history of that and cultural differences and things were something I found fascinating for a very long time. And then when I was in school, in college, one of our earliest sort of experiences as incoming students, during orientation and stuff, there was like a consent workshop in the residence hall, very casual, like your RA, resident advisor, is just like 1 year older. A student is leading a little workshop where you're sitting in a circle and talking about consent, and like the RA had condoms on her door, free condoms, so that because they assume like everybody
of
is
course, natural at that
adults
age,
and you're on a campus living alone, like of course you're going to be having sex, so let's make it as easy and safe as possible for you to access the resources you may need, and it was so nice to come of age in that environment where like there was health services in the same building. If you need an STI test or a contraception, a conversation around contraception to figure out a method you might want to utilize, or even these peer-to-peer conversations around things like consent. It was really nice for me to come of age and have those first experiences and first sense of just like who you are sexually and stuff in an environment that was extremely sort of permissive,
Yeah.
And I really like sex. I like quickly figured out that this is so much fun and like so interesting as well. Like just how we, the psychology and the also just the like practical reality of these experiences. I just thought like this is the most interesting thing in life. Like I need to.
I think
study
curiosity
this
is the
properly,
greatest teacher.
Yeah.
So I think
And it drives so many of the things people do and who we are and how we see the world, like your identity, because sex is not just like, penetration on a Saturday night in a dark room or something, right? It's about how you see the world, how the world
Connect
sees
with
you,
it,
and like who you want to be and what drives you, and it's so many things.
So, with your parents, you had nothing but support. I think that's beautiful. But and then you became a content creator, a YouTuber, talking about sexual health and sexual pleasure. Did you find it challenging to find partners who could kind of accommodate that aspect of your work?
So I have never been on a dating app. I was in a relationship with somebody from before I started my YouTube channel till very recently. So in a way, I wasn't like dating when I was already in a relationship before I started this content. So I actually, but I'm sure people, I think I wouldn't be on a dating. I think definitely when you do this type of work, and even just from the types of DMs and comments I receive, I think that many people see you a certain way, or like, I don't know. I mean, the honest fact is like I'm a zombie at my computer or at my office or whatever, just working on most days. Like I think people think I have like orgies or something. I wish, I really wish. But when you're running a business, you ain't got time for that.
So the reason why I ask you this about family, about like finding a partner, is because if somebody wants to start a career in this, I feel like if I were to start a career in this today, I would really think about, oh, what will the world say? Will men start assuming that I'm really easy, when they approach me? Will I not be able to form meaningful relationships because of their perception of me? Or will they try to control? Like, how do you deal with all that noise?
I think, like, you absolutely have to stop giving a fuck what other people think of you. And honestly, like, am I going to not do a certain thing because I worry what men think of me? Like, fuck that, man. I feel really lucky that my parents had that. I think it's much harder to distance yourself from parental approval and love, no matter how. And sometimes some people, unfortunately, have really cruel parents. And I wish, sometimes some people do need to even make that boundary from not allowing even what your parents think to matter. I think that would be much harder to my parents' love does matter to me, so I'm really grateful I don't have to work for it. But random people, I do not care. And I think also I was like one of those people with few friends. Like I wasn't, I don't drink, I don't party, I never had an entourage or a group or like a sense of like all of these people need to think I'm cool for me to be. I was like, I'm not cool, dude. Like I'm not even playing that game. You know what I mean? And I think that my sense of my self-worth and stuff came from, I guess, like slightly more nerdy pursuits, which people didn't seem to value very much anyway. Adults seem to value it. Like, I think parents or teachers or something give you, like, accolades for, you get some prizes or some gold stars or whatever. For me, it's like the productivity trap. Even though no one imposed it on me, I think that maybe, like, too much of my identity comes from work, how I'm doing at work, how much work I'm doing, like... Do you know what I mean? I find it very hard to stop working.
Yeah, I've seen that. There's no other way to have written a book, to have the kind of following you have it, to have launched a brand and to launch product after product after product. Yeah, it doesn't work without you just always being on. And I think a large part of that, especially in my therapy, I've explored that because I started my brand when I was just 19, a large part of my identity comes only from work. And then in recent years, I started a journey of like, who am I without it?
Exactly.
But I think because of the upbringing that you had and the environment that you had, and also very importantly, the schooling that you had in the US that allowed you to figure out who you are. So your identity is pretty solid in that sense. And I think if parents can allow for that to happen is the biggest gift that they can give their child. So now I want to move to slightly like more serious topics per se, like socio-political questions that we have. Um, with instances like the US passing the abortion law or Indonesia passing a law banning sex outside of marriage, do you feel like somehow the world is regressing? Or do you think that no, there are pockets, or especially like India somehow is moving forward? Because I kind of feel that like the world is regressing, but we're like moving forward even at a snail's pace. But what is your view on that?
Progress, I think, is rarely linear. You know, I wish it was just like we're going forward and forward and forward. But I think that you make some progress, and then some people actually, almost as a reaction to that progress, are like, no, we don't want change. You know, because some people are used to a previous way that maybe they believe served them. It's funny how some people seem to see rights as like a pie.
Yeah.
And like, more rights for you means less rights for me, when that's not really how it works. But you see a lot of people like reacting so aversely to the idea that like women deserve rights, queer people deserve rights. It doesn't mean you have less rights. But somehow they see that and they also, I think there's this tendency to see certain groups as like subhuman. They don't deserve rights. I think like for a long, long, long time, women and queer people have been viewed as somehow like some subhuman version of, not worthy the way men are, right? Get the crumbs or nothing at all. And then that tends to even be internalized to some extent, where you become the foot soldiers of your own oppression.
Yeah.
And
that
so
is the cruelest
then you'll
thing,
see women even like trying to advocate for ideas like abortion is unethical or whatever, when it's technically supposed to be, or that feminism is not. I see women these days sometimes on the internet being like, oh, we don't need feminism. And I'm just like, the reason you can even say this is because of feminism,
Absolutely.
The reason you have this platform and can even voice this dumb opinion. Anyway.
What do you do with your anger? Do you get angry when you see these laws getting passed, or just women talking like this about feminism?
I don't find anger very, if someone disagrees with you, if you shout at them, they're not going to agree with you. So I actually try and come from a place of compassion, even with the people I disagree with. I can sound annoyed here or rant about something, of course. But I think that when you shout at someone who's saying the dumb thing, instead of being like really compassionate and trying to get them to reconsider their opinion.
Yeah.
When you shout, anyway, people don't like changing their mind. They're embarrassed to change their mind also. If you've said something with conviction, now you look like an idiot because you have to say, sorry, actually, maybe I was wrong.
Yeah.
So if you're shouting at them, like, you're wrong, they're not going to be like, yes, I'm wrong. But if you're very kind in trying to get them to see something a different way, I find that they're more receptive to the message.
So I like that you said that, because in today's time, that's a rarity, And I remember one of your reels that you posted where you said, I get so many comments saying you have small boobs, you have small boobs. And I love the reel that you made. It's like saying the sun is shining today or the grass is green. So I think it really aligns with what you're saying, and like your actions really align with your words, and that's beautiful to see, actually. And also the fact that you don't get jaded in the world when so much is happening, and you can very, very consciously say that I choose to be kind.
I think because also these platforms reward controversy. It's almost like now, if you're driven by clicks and you're getting paid based on how many clicks, views, this, that, there's so many creators who literally just say the most dumb, shocking thing because that is what's driving their revenue model. you know, and then it's also showing every viewer the media that aligns with their views. So if you're a bigot, you're going to see more bigoted stuff, and if you're left-leaning, you'll see the more left-leaning stuff. And so your media and my media are so different, and what you think the world is and what I think the world is are these complete echo chambers. And so then in the left just keeps who's the more woke person is like the arguments. It's so stupid. And the right thinks that these left people are idiots anyway. So there's like zero kind of like reconciliation or some kind of dialogue, you know, and ultimately if you're only creating for your dinner table guests, they already believe the stuff you believe. So how do you get people who don't already share your opinions to consider them, right? Change is rarely radical, it tends to be incremental. So you got to keep saying the same thing every day and say it in a way that's palatable. And many people are like, fuck that, we don't have the time for this bullshit. Like, why do I have to do this emotional labor for these idiots? But also maybe because like my life is not being affected by their adversarial opinion. I'm cocooned by the safety of my privilege. Do you know what I mean? So you can say your misogynistic bullshit and I still get to go to a comfortable place. Perhaps if I was less cocooned by a very comfortable ecosystem or whatever, I'd have less patience and empathy for somebody who's like, I can understand the rage that some people feel, especially when you're on the receiving end of like so much unfair treatment as somebody from a marginalized identity, and then you're expected to do the emotional labor of like educating the oppressor. I get that that's not what we should be expecting people to do. I recognize though that I have a lot of privileges and that actually I've been cushioned from many of the injustices that perhaps other people with some overlapping identity markers as mine, but also with perhaps others that where maybe I have the oppressor identity. Yeah. I probably have the oppressor identity for caste, class, socioeconomic background. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it can be fashionable these days to be like, I'm brown, I'm a woman, I'm like, so poor me, and like participate in the oppression Olympics as if just because you have some things, you should just claim that marginalization without acknowledging your privileges. But you can be a brown woman and still have participated in the oppression of other people. And I have not really suffered. You know, I don't want to fucking pretend just because it gives me social media brownie points to seem like I had this really difficult life and now I'm an actor. I don't even think my activism is not good enough or significant enough, I feel, to think of myself as an activist. I'm just this woman on the internet who likes sex, who thinks it's okay to like sex, who wants to encourage people to also feel comfortable in their skin. Yeah, but you know what I mean? I think it's so easy you have 1 million followers and some 5 awards and 10 something else, and suddenly you're an expert who's like the, I don't know, authority on this thing. But honestly, we should be interrogating all of that. Like, who gets these awards? Do they even fucking mean anything? You know, does even like numbers on social media really mean you're the best at something? Like, I'm constantly interrogating that stuff and not allowing for my sense of achievement or self-worth to be determined by these arbitrary metrics that tend to be very biased in who gets to have them. You know, they are not equally accessible. And if my privileges have certainly helped. Even how you look or the color of your skin, with various things end up being stuff that algorithm amplifies. And it's, there's like biases in the way the media is served.
Anger only begets anger, and I get a lot of people need to put anger out there for the world to realize that this is wrong. Like, I also understood this much later in my life, that anger is simply an emotion that tells you that something is wrong. But when it turns to rage, when you turn it into rage, is where it kind of becomes destructive. But anger in itself is not a bad emotion.
And maybe it propels some people to, it propels some people's activism and ambition and stuff. You know, you want to change something because you're angry about it. And I completely get that also. And you can be quietly angry or very overtly angry. Different people express things differently. But I think also to some extent, there's so much joy to be experienced when you dismantle these ways of thinking, when you have a more expansive sense of like who you can be.
Yeah.
That I also want to paint a picture of that joy. Like, look, if you let go of some of your ideas, look what awaits you. Like, don't you want to come have fun at the end of like this tunnel, you know?
And that's what brings me to my next question, which is, has this journey of yours, which is that you picked this subject as your subject for your work, and you show up every day and you just have so many ideas and you're just so passionate about it, you derive a large aspect of your identity from it. How has it informed you on your own journey in life? Like, how has Leeza become Leeza, or is becoming Leeza through this journey of
That's such a nice
self-discovery?
question. I think that, again, it's just what a blessing that I get to like think about and read about and talk about with other people, and like that my work allows me to interrogate gender, sexuality, pleasure. I mean, like what a wonderful thing, right? That I can officially spend my day thinking about some of this stuff. I think that I was allowed to really learn about myself also by talking about these things and getting so much interesting perspective, feedback, insights from people extremely different from me. What's so interesting about the internet, unlike TV or something, when you say something, you have immediate feedback. That's something that you can engage with, right? Yeah. And what I found was so beautiful about, when you put yourself out there and say something that maybe people don't normally talk about and do so without shame, it's almost like you've lit a match. Like, people just want to feel like they can have this conversation. They are dying to have the conversation. But just being on the receiving end of so much feedback, not only about what I'm saying, but rather feedback about like how this concept applies to that person's life, or like how they've navigated their identity or relationships or sex, was I think like allowed for my imagination to expand in this way that otherwise we tend to have really homogenous immediate environments, you know. Most of our friends and family and whatever are like very similar to, it's complete bubble, and then you think that everybody, that the whole, to a worm in horseradish, the whole world is horseradish.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it's been so, like, sex is such a democratic thing, whether you're whichever part of the world you're in, whatever your gender, whatever your profession, socioeconomic background, etc., there's going to be some, even if you're asexual, I'm not saying the physical act, but your sexuality, your identity, how it factors into your life, it is such a universal thing. Or like even just the desire for pleasure in some format, so universal, and so it's so, I think, so sort of beneficial to put yourself in context other than the one you already know, to just think of what all is possible. My own identity feels so much more expansive than I allowed it to be, I think, when I had fewer reference points.
That's why I tell people I did my own Instagram for like 10 years, and a lot of what the brand is today is because of the DMs that I read and the comments that I read and the feedback that I took. So netizens for me are not really like scary people out there, which people, like, I'm always asked, what do you do with trolls, what do you do with so many opinions? I said I just check where it's coming from, and I think if that's going to add value to me and my own, whether personally or professionally, I take it. So yeah, I think that is the beauty of what we do. It just helps us connect to so many people that we would not have been able to.
I think if you are willing to be honest and vulnerable and talk about things without, like, really in an unfiltered, genuine way, I think that people respond to that. The internet can also be a very supportive place.
Yeah,
like, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of support as well. It has this reputation of being this horrible cesspool, but it can also be a really sort of inspiring and wonderful place.
Yeah. Okay, after this one, actually the conversation can go to the meta algorithm can be tricky, because you're talking about tricky for content like yours. You've previously expressed in your interviews that you had to revise content in order to avoid shadow banning and stuff like that. How do you think content creators can ensure that their target audience is reached when they're talking about issues as such? Is there a formula? Have you figured out how to do it?
So, yeah, in the last year and a half, Meta has become increasingly restrictive around its ability to serve content around sexual health, pleasure particularly, and also particularly women and queer people's sexual identities, health and pleasure. I think, they don't really issue reasons or like explain why their policy changed, but they have this new sensitive content filter be a default setting on everyone's account that you have to manually change, which nobody does in settings, should you wish to be served content that is considered sensitive. So otherwise, they're just not going to serve it. Content that they used to serve, they will just not serve anymore. Abortion, for example. It was strangely timed around the same time as Roe versus Wade, and it's a global thing. I am speculating. I do not have an official statement from Meta confirming this, but I think that the right in America was cracking down on reproductive rights and things like that, and that there's enough funding from various stakeholders on, and there's enough audience also. To some extent, these platforms serve what their audience indicates to them they're okay with or not okay with or whatever. Instead of having a spine, they just, okay, we don't want people to drop their Cheerios, So I think, unfortunately, there is a global sort of move towards a more rather than a less permissive social media environment around sexual health and pleasure-based educational content even. Anyway, there was rules around like nudity, even in art, or like sexual solicitation and stuff like that. And that's a different conversation to have. I'm going to pick my battles. I think things like, I don't know, uncensoring female nipples or, legalizing sex work are also very valid battles to fight. But unfortunately, there's so many hours in the day. And so currently I'm most concerned with trying to get it okay to talk about like sexual health and rights. But actually, they're all related, and any fight for any rights should be the fight for all rights. So for various reasons, it's beyond me why people are so scared of sex and pleasure when there's all kinds of other very questionable and arguably more damaging content formats that are not only present but even rewarded, whether it's the rigging of an election or whether it's lots of things can happen based on how you sway opinion on subjects very different from the stuff that they seem to target as sensitive. So there's that, and it's definitely harder than ever before to create organic content about sexuality and sexual health for anyone who's watching who wishes to become a creator in this regard or whatever. A few years ago, organic content, as long as there was no nudity or sexual solicitation, it was somewhat level playing field. Like if your content was interesting and people were interested in it, it would be served to people. But today, words like penis, vagina, sex, orgasm, clitoris, abortion, whatever, the just everyday scientific language even of the anatomy and the processes and stuff are triggering their AI-driven censorship, where your reel will be highlighted in your account status, being like, you have to take this down because it is sexually suggestive and this. And if you don't, your account can't be shown to non-followers. It'll be like account status cannot be shown to non-followers until you take down all of this content.
Okay.
And that's on the weaker end of the censorship, where it's like, okay, well, we're not kicking you off the platform. You didn't actually break any rules, but now this content is unwelcome here. So unless you only want to be seen by people who already follow you because they've opted in, then you're going to have to delete all this content. Otherwise, we will not show you in Reels, Explore, Search, which
So
is like, then there's
how
no
did you deal with
growth,
that?
right? I keep deleting content. I literally have to delete content every few days or weeks. You can appeal. Sometimes they get reinstated. Because sometimes it's AI-driven, not human-driven, right? Then you get a human review when you appeal. You think, I don't know, Meta's extremely opaque in its support.
Yeah.
It's not like, and even though you have some creator manager and this, that, they don't do anything. It's like dealing with, it's like, you just have to, it's like whack-a-mole, I'm the mole. You just got to keep popping up and hope they don't whack you this time. And for some reason, they're very, very scared of sex toys. I don't know why, because anything's a sex toy if you're brave enough, Do you know what I mean? Like, why is it okay for me to hold whatever, your high heel, man, and or the microphone or whatever? Like, I can make it sexual, or you can hold something normal and it can be normal. It's so what is sexual, what is obscene is such a subjective question, a subjective question. So it is peculiar how these things work and how AI works, and it often reflects the biases of the people who have created it and are operating it.
Okay. So, Leeza, so far we've spoken about a lot of very, very crucial, sensitive topics. And I love the takeaway for me from that whole conversation was we need to fight the fight, but we need to do it with kindness, with full awareness of our own privileges and our own position in so many, like, I could have been an oppressor while still being a woman. I think that is a very important takeaway, and I think if all of us kind of lead life that way, there will be a change. So thank you for that. Now, as you know, hashtag Preach was started as a platform by creators for creators. So this next segment is going to be dedicated to us talking about the strategies, the ideas, the vision behind your success, which is writing your book, starting your podcast, your content creation, but most importantly, the brand that you have created. There's a physical product out there that is dedicated to the work that you've done over the past decade. So let's get into that. So my first question is, and I get asked this a lot too, that when you're starting a brand, how do you find investors or partners, or do you think that it's okay to just start on your own? Like, what is the kind of seed money that somebody requires to start or launch a brand? Because it requires branding, it requires somebody making your logo, your packaging, your product, your R&D, and then the marketing behind that, and getting it on like across omni-channel platforms. So what do you think is the right way to just begin?
So my brand is co-founded by a brand incubator. It's a Swedish brand incubator called Basel. And so I was lucky to have support in the areas that were not areas I already knew how to do. You know, I come in with the interest in years spent around content, product, marketing, messaging, education. I have been a sex toy connoisseur for a long time. But, you know, I hadn't had prior experience in customer service, logistics, legal, shipping, whatever, Shopify, like various aspects of whether you're selling dildos or doorknobs, you're going to have to figure out if you have a DTC brand, which I'm not saying it's not necessarily rocket science. You can learn it on your own. But I think having a co-founder that was very well versed with that already allowed for the learning curve to be less steep, because that, you know, I inherited a small team and an office and like functions that had already been warmed up in those regards, as opposed to having to build those from absolute scratch, so that I got to spend more time on the things that I actually am good at. And kind of have a skill set that it's nice to have a co-founder who's good at the things you're not good at, right? If you're looking for a co-founder. It's also depending on how much capital you have. I don't know, different people have different access to capital from friends, family, or themselves, or whatever they've already earned, or savings, or whatever. And I think that if you are in a position to take risks, or have an appetite for risk, or have enough capital, then, and you want to start for yourself, obviously you own your company then. When you're taking investment from somebody else or co-founding something, it's likely that you're going to be sharing equity. So I think it depends on, it really is no one answer fits all. Like you can share your approach as well, because I think you only diluted much later. But actually the incubator approached me with the idea of like, why don't we do this? Because I had been such an advocate of pleasure products and lube on my handles long before I had my brand. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a brand, so now let's talk about toys. It was like, toys changed my life. Like, I've got to talk. Like, I went from never having had an orgasm to orgasming whenever I want. Like, this was third eye-opening. I need you to know about it. You know, and people are like, where do you get this stuff? And unfortunately, there were not very many or very good products available in India until quite recently, right? So I'd be like, when you travel or get your cousin's friend, somebody to send you, and always recommend a foreign brand. And like, it was only very recently. And then there's been so much progress, luckily. In the last 3 or 4 years in India, it's become so much easier to buy it. You can order one online and it comes immediately. And it's amazing that progress, like we made up for what was not available for decades, suddenly became available and good quality and many with brands like ours and stuff. In the last year, it's really boomed, you know.
So how long did the brand take from the idea to you actually launching the products?
About 2 years. We were working on it during the pandemic, starting the sort of like conceptualizing, sampling, formulating this, that, and then we launched last year in 2023 April. So I think we started 2020. Actually, how long was the pandemic? I think like between 2020 2021 we were already working on the idea, you know.
So you look at the more creative aspect of it, like you manage
Right
the
now I'm
branding,
very
the
involved in
packaging.
everything
Right.
because I think that's just how it is when you're a founder of something. But it's only 1 year old, you know. I think it's still so early stage that the team and the vision is still something that is drawing a lot from like the direction I wanted to go in some. And I really am glad to have co-founders like that who really honored who were not like you show up for the photo shoots and put
Yeah.
your name on the box. No, this is your brand and you are like driving this and it's what you want it to be. Feel such a sense of accountability. Do you know what I mean? I need to make sure the customer has a good experience, that this does what it says it does, and that even if I had it my way, I'd be like hand
Pyari
delivering.
definitely does.
Understands
what it
the
says
assignment?
It does.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Pyari gets it.
You know, but everything, like you want everything to be perfect and good. I'm still so new to it, I think, that there's no distance for me. It's like if I had it my way, I would hand deliver every product, reply to every customer service email myself and package it, you know, but I cannot. The volumes will
I
not
agree.
allow it.
So,
but I
you know-
wish I could, you know, so I'm still very involved. I
And
haven't
I
been
don't
able
think
to.
you're going to be able to give up on that for really long. Like, I was asked a question recently, and they were like, when do you start delegating? When do you hire a COO? When do you hire? I said, it's like bringing up a baby. Not that I have children or that I'm maternally inclined, but I find it very easy. Like, when a child is young, it kind of needs you to just survive. Like, it needs you to feed it, bathe it, poop it, stuff like that. At that time, you can't say, I'm going to be able to delegate it. Yeah. And then there'll be a point where, okay, it can at least walk on its own. So, but you need somebody who can walk with him and take care of
Exactly.
him. And then there is a point where, okay, they're in school, you need to give it some time. And then they're like teenagers where they don't really need you, but you're like, okay, I want to be involved. And adults are like, okay, look, I found my person and I'm going away with this person, etc. So I think that is the journey of a brand also. At no point does it stop needing you. But for somebody to think that I can remotely manage and create a brand and I'm an influencer and I'll just give my name and lend my name to the brand and I'll just show up for the photo shoot and it'll become a success. That is where I think a lot of businesses are failing. So, I mean, just for the listeners here, Leeza was up till 2 a.m. last night figuring some Shopify lag. So I think that is all of us. And that is why this conversation with you for me is very fulfilling, to know that I'm speaking to somebody who is actually like really, really passionately involved in all aspects of it. Do you feel like being an influencer or a content creator makes people take your products less seriously, or you feel like you haven't faced that?
See, I think, no, I'm aware that perception might exist, and even I like wouldn't purchase from an influencer brand, honestly. Like not, or like there's a negative stereotype around influencer brands being frivolous, but also the idea that influencer brands are like, what the fuck are they selling? Sorry, dude, I say fuck a lot. Is it okay on your
it's
podcast?
okay, yeah.
What are they selling? You know what I mean? I think like makeup and fashion and things like that, which tend to be the largest influencer brand kind of niches, or perfume or something. It's like this person didn't really. This H&M has nice clothes.
Yeah.
I can get, you know what I mean? Why will I get this
What's so
T-shirt from
special
this
about you?
person?
Yeah.
Or like, where they're using their cachet to sell you something mainly because they're hoping you're a fan of them.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's mainly going to be like 12-year-olds who buy that stuff because after a certain age, you don't really want, like, I don't want a Taylor Swift T-shirt, man. I listen to her music, but like, I'm done. Maybe when I was 12, I would have. So I think like this thing of merchandise and just random products which are relying too heavily on the influencers' popularity as opposed to adding value itself. Do you know what I mean? I think tomorrow if I was trying to sell candles or diaries or something, I don't think my people would buy them. I'm selling pleasure products because I genuinely believe in them, because I also know a lot about them, and because I recognize the value they're solving a problem. You know, and there's not that many other places you can get really good ones. And you do have a problem with, like, there's a value proposition. I'm not just saying buy it because I made it. Today with some of the, I don't know, IKEA, this, that, what am I, H&M, T-shirts and coffee mugs and all. How is the influencer brand going to compete? They don't have karigars making it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're like mass producing. And at the end of the day, you are adding plastic to the bottom of the ocean. Like, it has to be worth it. You know what I mean? I hope I'm driven by like 1 million orgasms. Okay, I need to deliver 1 million orgasms. at least.
So when you were picking Leezus as the name, did you go back and forth on that? Did you feel like you didn't want to attach it to your name, or you were very clear that it had to be attached?
For me, it was like I want the name to be playful and happy and short and easy to remember, easy to spell. I also thought that, like, to some extent, the USP that why not lean into the fact that what I have that other sexual wellness brands don't have is me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is me.
Yeah.
So why not use that? Like, I've worked hard to be a trustworthy voice in this space, and I don't take that lightly. You know, I barely do any brand collaborate. If I cannot stand for something or will not use it myself, I will not tell other people to use it. I say no to so many brand associations because I just can't stand for the product. So I think people recognize that and know that I'm not just selling just anything. Do you know what I mean? That if Leeza's saying that this is good, she means it. And so I think that and whatever, it's kind of if you're interested in sexual health and pleasure in India, it's a niche, but if you're interested in it, you probably have come across my content. So I think that I wanted to lean into the fact that this is an extension of what I've been doing. It's not some new thing. It's not,
It has to be
waffles or
authentic.
something.
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, the word
and
is overused.
consistent with what I've been doing already.
Yeah.
So
I think, very sadly, authentic as a word has just lost
diluted to
but it actually is the only word that I feel like, even when people ask
true
me,
to yourself, I guess.
How do you stay relevant? And I'm like, if you're just genuinely putting what comes to you very naturally and very purely out there, consciously and thoughtfully, then that is being authentic, and that people will respond to that. So I've seen your messaging that goes out there, your photo shoots, they're very, very, very well done, very tastefully done. So do you as a team, when you sit down and kind of ideate on this, do you very consciously think of how to navigate this very culturally sensitive country and very complex country that we live in? Do you take that into consideration when you're ideating your campaigns?
Something I've been factoring into how I do my work from the beginning, because as I said, I don't want to alienate those who don't agree with me. I want to invite them to the table. So, and I think portraying a picture of joy, like, look, dude, it's fun over here. Come sit with me, is what I want to try to do even with Leezus. So, I mean, and also you have to conform to the various policies of the platforms on which you're intending to put out this media. So, not only the cultural sensibilities, where a slightly gentler approach rather than a really brazen approach to sexuality and stuff tends to be more palatable, but also on the platforms, you can't be too explicit anyway. So I think that the power of suggestion and humor and an energy, creating an energy, it should be a joyful, sexy energy. Who are you sexually, is the overarching question. And I want the products also to have that sense of inspire curiosity, joy and things. And people understand how they work when they read we obviously provide that information, and we do ads, and there are sales targets and everything. But I think it's also one of those incredibly democratic things where most people are interested in learning more. It is curiosity and evoking. It is even if the person is not yet ready to buy, they want to know what it is. I think there is a big advantage of the fact that these products are still somewhat new, that it is an exciting theme. Sex sex sells, right? To some extent.
Yeah,
you don't have
100%.
to work too hard to get people to want to know what it is. And yet I don't want to ever lean into that thing of utilizing, exploiting the sexual aspect of it for in a clickbaity way. Do you know what I mean? Because you want to also eradicate the stigma instead of playing into the stigma. So instead of being you want Leezus to be I want you to be, it should feel sexy without being kind of leaning into your already
not
existing
an authority, but more like a buddy, like a friend.
But not stigmatizing. You know what I mean? Curiosity inspiring without evoking controversy or stigma. So I think there's a fine line.
What does your data tell you? Who is shopping Leezus? Group is
So
shopping?
we don't sell to people younger than 21 technically.
Right.
Because that's just, we want to be, I think if we didn't have certain legal considerations to keep in mind. I don't think that you need to be 21 to use a sex toy, but that's my personal opinion, and I will reserve it for myself. So it's definitely like people who are over 21. Also, of just Indians on the internet tend to be in the 18 to 35 age group, and also tend to be men. Only 1 in 3 internet users is women, something like that, unfortunately. Still, especially for, I think to some extent, like let's say with your brand and your products, purchasing power is going to dictate who interacts with your brand to some extent. Whereas with because it was just education and it was free first, and also sex, and also the product price point is somewhat lower, we're reaching more, firstly, maybe even more men than women, because like things like condoms and sex toys and things, even if they're to be used with a woman, it's more likely to be a man making the purchase. Because it's like, if it's going to arrive at the house and someone's name is on the box, even if it's discreet, if your mom opens it, it's better that your husband had it to his name than, you know what I mean? Or like whatever, the cousin or brother or whoever, the boy in the house is more likely to have the phone, have the card, or whatever. Various access to agency and permissiveness around buying a sexual wellness product is still something that skews in the direction of men greatly. Also in India, like most people's first sexual experience is still correlated with the age of marriage, where so a lot of the people buying such a product would then be married, and in which case, if the husband's not okay with this, it's unlikely that she's going to get a vibrate. She'd have to hide it and this, that. Sure. So it tends to, like, men have to go on this journey of women being able to access pleasure and health. Unfortunately, like even to go to a gynac, your dad or husband or someone has to take you there. Someone has to, like we're not really yet in a place where women have the ability to safely get to buying a condom or going to the doctor or buying a vibrator. Like 100%. How do you do that safely yourself?
Even in our bubbles.
It's not yet easy.
What is the method to your madness? I just want to know what a day in your life looks like, or what a month looks like.
I unfortunately have to do less of the fun things that I used to do as a content creator, now that I also have a business to run and I choose them. I mean, I have less time basically. Being a content creator is like a full-time job. But yeah, right now my days are like, I feel like a robot. I wake up really early, go to sleep really late, and I'm working all day, and it is a hustle. But I'm lucky to have a really good team for Leezuz. On the content side, I do most of the things myself for my content and continue to. I think I'm also like not a good delegator. I want to do everything myself. I mean, I think it's easier to delegate very self-contained functions, but the ones that need my oversight, it is hard for me to not micromanage. I think it takes time though to cultivate and sort of a relationship with somebody who then understands how you like things.
So we're going to take a quick break. It's actually a PSA because we care about your nipples. Ladies, I know sometimes even a cafe outing can be super sticky and annoying. Now imagine going through an entire wedding like that. You don't have to. Nipposh has these amazing non-adhesive nipple covers that literally stick with just your body heat, no glue, zero sticky situation all day long. Speaking of comfort, I want to ask you, when do you feel the most comfortable in your skin?
I feel like, as opposed to a moment and like I think I'm getting more and more comfortable in my skin. I think at 30, I'm 34 now, I feel more comfortable in my skin in my 30s than I did in my 20s than I did in my teens. Do you know what I mean? Like it's definitely a onward and upward thing, I feel, with age and just
I can relate.
Self acceptance and like confidence.
Especially in an Indian context. When I sit with my girls here at lunch and their birthdays are coming, they're actually really, really sad. And they're all in their 20s. And then it's their 26th birthday, and God forbid they touch their 28th birthday. And then for me, that is like so sad, because I asked the girls, why do you feel so sad about your birthdays? They're like, because then it means our parents are going to ask us to get married, or that, we still don't have partners and we're 28. There must be something wrong with us. It was a segue, this one, but I think I love that you answered that age actually makes you feel, aging makes you feel more comfortable in your skin, I think.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's so sad that like women are fed this narrative that like you're over the hill or something after a certain age. And also I think it's such a, like, what a scam, they made women believe that their inexperience is where their value comes from. You're a virgin, you're innocent, you look like how you look and how your body is and how your mind is, like the less experienced and knowledgeable you are, that's what makes you valuable. It's fucking bullshit. Like, when would you ever attribute value to inexperience.
Yeah.
You would,
Wow.
wouldn't you pay somebody more if you're hiring a CEO if they had 20 years, over 10 years, over 5 years?
Yeah.
But you want a virgin wife and you want her to be 21 and you want her to like never have had a relationship before. And, you know, ideally she should stop working. Like why curtail? You want basically a malleable, acquiescent piece of clay that you can shape and fuck around with and control, you know? And if they're not controllable, they're not desirable.
there's
And
something
then
wrong
we
with them.
feed into it where we're feeling bad that we're a certain age or must underplay how many partners we've had or must not seem to want to be ambitious or must dress a certain way. Like make yourself small, right? That's the message. Women must be small. They must not even laugh loudly. Don't fuck it.
Yes.
Why are we not sitting like this, Shubhika, right now?
I agree.
Huh? Why am I not sitting like this? Like this is
Yeah.
not okay.
Yeah.
This is not okay. I do this. I police myself. I will sit like this. From such a young age, you're taught to sit like this, right?
Yeah.
You see like these dude bros on their podcast just like,
Yeah.
no. Do you know what I mean? Like men take space and women are meant to make themselves small. Like, do we not see the scam? This is a scam, okay? This is a scam. Tell everyone how old you are. Like,
Yeah. Tell everybody how old
and
you
life
are.
gets better, dude. I'm telling you. I'm so
really does.
glad I'm not 20.
Like
I used to fear it. I'm not saying I was never subject to this conditioning. And like I still think like, why do I go for these rude touch-ups, man?
Yeah.
But I go for the rude touch-ups. We're all still, like half the shit I say is me at me. It's not like I'm perfect and none of this affects me. But I recognize it's a fucking scam.
The tagline for #preach is once upon a disruption, which is why we have folks like you who are disrupting what content creation, what brands, what products, what language, what vocabulary should look like. And in every industry, like there is something that really requires disruption. What do you think it should be in your industry? What requires a disruption?
I look forward to the day that access to pleasure is equal. Like, I think there's still inordinate amounts of shame and also barriers to access for people who are not straight men. Basically, it's just very unequal playing field.
Yeah.
And I think that there could be no more profound indicator of equality than equal access to pleasure. Like in a world where everyone can claim to have an equally convenient, safe, and easy time having an orgasm, even in their relationship, like just the scripts we're fed around what sex should look like absolutely undervalue or deprioritize the way women or queer people might experience pleasure. So I think that you need to have education, water, safety, all of these indicators for development, all these things, in order to end up as an adult with access to pleasure. So many things have to be in place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's I think to value pleasure, like pleasure is seen as some frivolous, shameful thing, as
Like
opposed
fashion,
to as opposed to something that is fundamental. And I think the sooner we see it as, like if on a very basic, on gender equality indices, if women were having orgasms on surveys, if they were able to report having orgasms frequently and always the way men do who are sexually active, it would be a different world. Like we're finally seeing, I don't know, some talk of, representation in boardrooms or government or something, but the bedroom remains something we're quiet about.
Yeah.
So I think seeing pleasure and equality of sexual and reproductive rights is fundamental rather than optional or some niche issue.
Yeah.
I think would be the disruption I hope to see.
Okay, cool. So thank you, and we're done, and it's a wrap. If you've ever been called a misfit, a rebel, a disruptor, and stories of other nonconformists like you inspire you, then like, share, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear more extraordinary stories like this one.